was coach of Canada's national women's volleyball team, and we were putting a group together to go to San Francisco. And we thought in order to be fair, we would open it up to all the people in Western Canada who wanted to show up, not thinking anybody would show up because it was very difficult, but to break into our lineup. All of a sudden, these two little girls, well, they were fairly tall girls, came in from Brooks, Alberta. And I go, what are you doing here? Well, our coach sent us to try out for this team. And I went, you're kidding. Well, I was set back completely because these girls had good skills, and we ended up naming Betty to the team and taking her to San Francisco. So that was my first introduction to Betty Baxter, and I saw an example, a glimmer of greatness in this young lady.
There was a knock on my door in my apartment, and I opened the door, and there were two young women there, and one of them said, "Hi, I'm Betty Baxter from Brooks, Alberta, and I've come to play volleyball and to stay with you." I went, "Okay, come on in." So Betty came and lived with me for 3 or 4 months and played, and you know, she was a rising star. She was pretty amazing even then.
One of the things that, first of all, you know about Betty, she was unabashedly enthusiastic about the sport. She just loved to play and to compete. In addition to that, she had an absolute insatiable desire to learn. She just wanted to know how to get better, what should I do differently, or what can I do? And then, of course, she had this incredible physical talent. She was just a very physically talented girl. So you take those three attributes, love of the game, insatiable desire to learn, and an athlete with the physical talent. It was a coach's dream.
In 1977, we also went to the World Student University Games, and Betty was on that team. And that was in Sofia, Bulgaria. And I have to say, this was one of the many times that I really saw Betty's dedication. We were not playing well. We were not very good. And the only person, I have to say, who tried every point, every time was Betty through that whole thing. And as a result, she was named to the All-Star team there. So her career as a player was amazing.
During the years that she spent at UBC, where she led the team to 2 collegiate championships and became College Player of the Year at UBC, she learned a lot of tremendous leadership skills. And she became a really complete person with all of those skills, determination, enthusiasm, and leadership. She became, as we all know, the captain of the Olympic team in 1976. And I think she was the youngest captain of any Olympic team that year. So she was just a complete player.
She was probably the strongest volleyball, physically stronger than anyone else. She hit the ball really, really hard. She hit harder than anybody else. You did not want to be on the other side of what we used to call then the B's. When Betty hit hard, it hurt.
Betty Baxter has shown skill right across the board, both as a player, both with our club program, and then with the national team, and with the University of British Columbia, and then as a coach. I think that her dedication to the game is a clear example of why she should be named to the Volleyball BC Hall of Fame.
She was an amazing player. She gave everything. She has contributed in so many ways, not just as an Olympic player, but as a university athlete, and then after as club. She's coached, she's done advocacy, she's done leadership, she's done absolutely everything. And I think it's well-deserved, and I'm surprised it took so long for her to be inducted.
But you have earned this, you deserve it. Congratulations.
So Betty, I'd like to congratulate you on being inducted into the 2021 Volleyball BC Hall of Fame. This is well-deserved. Congratulations.
Thank you, Emma. And thanks to the BC Volleyball Association and their nominating committee for considering me and their efforts to put this evening together. In fact, after seeing that video, I'm glad I got a chance to look at it yesterday, because it's kind of hard to speak after seeing the video. I need a few minutes to get myself together. But I was surprised to get the call from Chair Dormy Ailing a few months ago, and I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversations in the lead up. But let me make one addition to Carol Bishop's comments in the video. When I stood at the door of her apartment on that June day in 1970, she not only offered me housing and a welcome to the big city, she also offered me a friendship that has lasted over 50 years. And that's precious to me. And I know several of my former teammates at every level, athletes I've coached and colleagues who love volleyball are here this evening. I want you to know I see you. I looked at the list and I'm so grateful for taking the time to listen tonight and to be part of this, because volleyball is a team sport, right? We did it all together. We covered so much ground in those training days, and many of you went on to be superb coaches and administrators in the sport, and I have nothing but respect and admiration for all of you. No one succeeds alone. I had more success in volleyball than a young girl from a small prairie town could ever expect. Jim Lawrence, my high school volleyball coach, made sure I had access to opportunities, and he took responsibility for getting me there. As I mentioned in the podcast, if some have read it or listened to it, he even borrowed a car to get me to Calgary to experience a higher level of play in my last few months of high school. For those listening in from Brooks, it was Tono Ohama's El Camino that made that trip several times, and I'm so grateful for that generosity from my community. Jim epitomized how the actions of a coach can be life-changing for athletes. His efforts opened doors for me, but also let me know that I was worth it. He believed I should have a chance. UBC's Marilyn Pomfret's simple act of suggesting that I run training drills expanded my experience in the game immensely. I know that if I was running a drill, I'd better show what real effort looked like when it came time for me to take part in that drill. And I'm so grateful for all those teammates I had at UBC who gave me the space to lead and never found me too much or too aggressive or too strong. It was a wonderful experience. I'd like to go back to those first days in Vancouver again after arriving at Carol's door. I didn't know much about practice or hard training, as I was less than 48 hours out of high school and I was from a small town. You could see I had my eyes wide open those first few days. But it was clear that there was a leader among the players training that July. Helen Hunt was a terrific athlete, a former Olympic swimmer, and a senior player who worked hard. And she had opinions. In those first few weeks, she gave me subtle messages, sometimes corrections, to let me know that she thought I could make it. I could be good. It made a world of difference for a kid in a brand new world. In 1974, when we started to train full time, Moo Park had a profound impact on my life. His expectations were high. The role of coach is such a powerful one. He taught discipline, mental toughness, and offered many training and competitive opportunities throughout the world. Through those times of tough training and travel, the team learned to trust each other. And I have so many fond memories of my times with the players on the national team and on the Olympic team in all the various combinations. We played hard, we laughed a lot, and we cried together. As captain in 1976, Moo told me that I was to be responsible for team harmony. We had moved into the Olympic Village a month early, and 12 of us were living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 1 bathroom and 3 sinks. I'll give you a minute to picture that. 12 young women with 1 bathroom and 3 sinks. We were crowded, tired, and stressed as the competition of a lifetime was about to begin. And Moo says to me, "Betty, you make sure the team has good harmony." One night it was freezing and we didn't have enough blankets. Older players stole some of the spare blankets from the younger players' beds. And I remember prowling around the Olympic Village at 9 p.m. trying to find someone to open the storage area so I could get a half a dozen more blankets. I was responsible for team harmony. That was one assignment in my 20s, but in the past 5 decades, I've been constantly working on team harmony for organizations, for nonprofits, for municipalities. I've almost got it figured out, Moo. A coach has a profound effect on the lives of athletes. I moved into coaching first at the university level and then with the national team. And it was Moo who was my role model for everything from technical training to managing mental preparation to team discipline. I took the responsibility so seriously, as was required. The seriousness is why it was so crushing to be fired from the job as national coach 19 months into it, and to be fired among rumors, not about the job I was doing, but who I was. Volleyball Canada had invested in me, a year-long coaching apprenticeship, success at the national university level, 2 weeks for coaching development in Bulgaria, all increasing my chances for success. But in 1981, that wasn't enough to counter the fear that a lesbian was in charge of the program. I was fired without cause and given 3 months' notice. Sexual orientation was not protected in the federal human rights legislation until that legislation was passed in 1986, 5 years later. The gymnasium and the related training facilities had been my home for 12 years. I didn't walk into a gym again for the next 3. My success had ground to a halt, but life throws interesting twists. The very same day I was fired, I'd been in a meeting with a group of women leaders in sport, and we were writing the first constitution for a new organization to be called the Canadian Association for the Advancement of Women in Sport, CAUSE. And we were having a long debate about whether it should be women in sport or women and sport. And finally, we settled on and, because we believed that if sport became better, if it became a more supportive and accessible place for women, it would be better for everyone. For men who didn't fit the stereotype of the high-performance athlete, for children of all kinds, and for women who might not have had access to even try a sport. So I was already involved in activism, but now I'd been cast out of sport. The next story is in the podcast, but it bears repeating. Kim Harris was a friend, a volleyball player from Saskatchewan, who I had met when I played with a men's team while at grad school in Edmonton and coaching the University of Alberta women's volleyball team after the Olympics. In 1984, he was assisting Sandy Silver, coaching the UBC women when Sandy was ill and on leave. Kim called and convinced me to run some practices. I was terrified to enter a gym, but with Kim's support, I did. And those few practices got me started coaching a women's club team in Vancouver. Kim had my back and accompanied me at several tournaments for the next year or so. Every coaching meeting, he was there, and often he was on the bench beside me when he wasn't playing himself. And he always had a big button on the side of his sweatsuit that said, "Proud to be gay." With his help, I made my way back as an amateur coach. And I knew then that women had few supports to learn about coaching without being overshadowed by more experienced men in many of the coaching courses or by men who were head coaches. So we needed women to learn how to be a head coach. So in 1987, I started with the support of the new association, CAUSE, and with the Canadian Intercollegiate Athletic Union, a coaching school for women. We held the school for a week every summer, and it was rotated through several universities to host it, with Edmonton, University of Alberta, McMaster, Dalhousie, Manitoba, and Victoria hosting. We trained over 300 women to coach volleyball, basketball, and in the last session, soccer. Each school had a woman head coach who was international level. They featured in each feature sport, and we had several women theory instructors, exercise physiology, biomechanics. So we showcased women role models. It was due to the success of that national coaching school for women that I was invited to speak at a conference in Norway and then offered a contract to coach one of the top women's volleyball clubs, KFUM Oslo, in the year 1989. It was another enriching, life-changing experience and my final time in the role of head coach. I came back from Norway and was very involved in hosting Celebration 90, the Gay Games and Cultural Festival in Vancouver. The games were a huge event, much bigger than ever anticipated, organized completely by volunteers with over 11,000 registered athletes. Anyone could play as long as they were willing to play alongside lesbian, gay, bi, and transgender folks. The last 20 minutes or so of the podcast tells the game's story and some of the challenges that we faced. But suffice to say, it changed Vancouver. And the considerable opposition to the gathering was erased by an overwhelming welcome and support evident in the city. Young people from all over the world came to BC to celebrate who they were. And for someone who had been rejected by the sports system a few years earlier, it was a gift for me to take part. By that time, I was ready to thank the Canadian Volleyball Association for firing me, as I'd found my calling as an activist and a teacher, striving for equality for all, and I could see the profound possibilities if we just let people know. To close, I want to come back to a point from the beginning. No one succeeds alone. I've outlined some of my experiences and some of the profound moments of support that enabled me to keep going in tough times. But the true foundation of my success in any endeavor has always been my family. I was so fortunate as a child because I was accepted for who I was. I was expected to work hard, to take responsibility, but I was supported in anything I wanted to try. I had a lot of energy, and I was a strong kid, mentally and physically. My mother would pack up the family for a road trip anytime the national team was playing within driving distance. 3 or 4 or 5 hour drives, they would come to watch me play a match for an hour. Sometimes they would drive all the way and watch me not play. But the message was always one of love. They would say, "We are so proud of you, but remember," and this is my mother's words, I can hear them, "you don't have to do this for us. Do it because you love to do it." It's taken me a lifetime to realize the incredible freedom and confidence that that love gave me. And I was incredibly fortunate to have family support. In my work, I've encountered so many young people who don't have family support. When I was fired, I methodically drove across Canada and came out to every family member along the way. And I was accepted for who I was. I had been afraid to come out to my family in the 1980s. But when I did, I was loved. That's not always the case for LGBTQ folks. I was determined then that I would start to help the change. I would say the word lesbian out loud until people, my family included, didn't flinch when they heard it. In 1982, that in itself was a challenge. Whole conversations would stop sometimes. The LGBTQ community has come a long way in the past 30 years, and in large part because people everywhere have had the courage to name themselves to their families, to their coworkers, and to their teammates. It's much harder to hate someone who you like and admire, someone in your family, in your office, in your neighborhood, than it is an anonymous other who you can blame or label on the internet. When you're a young gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans person, you always feel alone. Unlike folks who are marginalized for race or religion, the family is sometimes the scariest place to come out. It's still a vast majority of kids who are homeless on the street that are from the LGBTQ community. Kids still commit suicide because they don't think there's a place where they belong. You feel when you're a teenager that you are the only person on the planet who feels this way. And that's why I am so grateful for tonight. I'm so grateful for the BC Volleyball Association to give me the honor of entering the Hall of Fame fully visible as who I am. If just one person is one young person in particular, but any person is a little less afraid and a little less lonely from hearing my story, then we're on the right track. We still have a long way to go to ensure that every child has access to acceptance and has access to find that incredible sense of power in themselves that sport can deliver. I know because sport let me feel powerful. It let me find my body and know that my body would help me do anything, and I could trust my body. That's another message for women. We don't get a lot of encouragement as women to feel strong and powerful and take space in our bodies. And sport's one of the places we can do that. It still needs a lot of work, even in sport. I know some of you developmental coaches know that still. Asking a young girl to take a broad base of support, wide stance of support is quite different from asking even a 5-year-old boy to take a broad base of support. They know what that means. So to help you measure where we've come from and how important sport is to the journey towards equality, I want to share with you a kid's book. This kid's book, and I'm going to back up so you can see it, Proud to Play, Canadian LGBTQ+ Athletes Who Made History by Aaron Silver. This was published 2 weeks ago. Yes, I'm in the book, so it is shameless promotion. But it's a book of 12 athletes, 2 from the sport of volleyball, myself and Chris Both, who had the courage to be themselves and continue to the highest achievement in sport. It's published by Lorimer Kids Books from Toronto. Encourage your local library to buy it so young athletes who might need support can find themselves. Then maybe they can find us in sport. They can find the right sport and be welcomed with every chance of success. That's what we need to work for. Thanks so much for the honor of tonight. Thanks for listening.